Hi, welcome back to the next video snippet from The President and the Cockroach. Today we're going to read the first part of Chapter 6 called Trouble at Home. And then in the comments section right after this post, you'll see a little link to the Amazon.com page so that you can order a copy of the book for yourself and read it at home in your spare time, which you will have a lot of, I'm thinking. Okay. But if you would like to continue having me read it to you, I'm happy to do that. And in the next little while, you'll see me again with more stories. But for now, here's Trouble at Home. It was a Friday night, just after the first showing at the movie theater. Too early to go home, but too early to go anywhere else. Way back in the woods, things were getting steamy. At least the windows in the car were. The girl who sat in the driver's seat had arresting eyes that were almost blue and then almost gray, a sprinkling of freckles over the bridge of her pert little nose, and shoulder-length blonde hair parted just on the left side of down the middle. She was wearing jeans and a loose purple football jersey. Her partner in the goings-on in the front seat was a tall, skinny boy with dark, curly hair. He was also wearing jeans, but topped with a souvenir T-shirt from some one-hit band that was old when it had belonged to his older brother. The two were kissing like there was going to be a time limit, and the boy had his arms around the girl cleverly, he thought, under her jersey, trying to do his damnedest to figure out how to unhook her bra. The girl was enjoying the kissing and the boy's fumbling attempts to go a little further. The boy, who still hadn't got that goddamn bra unhooked, enjoyed the kissing too, and idly wondered if he would find the cute little freckles anywhere else besides on her nose. If he was lucky enough to make this discovery, the boy decided that he would like nothing better than to play connect the dots. There was a knock at the driver's window, and a bright light shone in on the kids, signaling them to pause to arrange their clothes. The girl driver rolled down the window. It was a cop, with a head of a roach, antenna twitching. "Move along, kids," he clicked. "Oh, hi, Officer Krang." "Okay." The girl smiled and finished putting her clothes back on in order. "Hi, Brittany," the big bug clicked. "You know this isn't the best place to, take a break." The officer walked back to his cruiser, got in, and drove out of sight. "Brittany," the young man stammered, trying his best to understand the incongruence of the series of events he had just experienced. "That cop had a cockroach's head." "It's okay, Tommy. Officer Krang lives next door to us. He came out of the pantry a couple of years ago. He's real nice," Brittany explained. "Britt, he's an insect. Just his head. Hey, his daughter Sophie, I've known her since we were in kindergarten. She plays second base on my softball team." "Second base, Britt?" Tommy grinned and reached for her again. "Oh, Tommy, you asshole." She laughed as she slapped his hand away, and then she leaned over and kissed him. "Come on, let's go get something to eat. I'm starved," Brittany suggested as she checked her makeup in the rearview mirror. "Then I'll take you home." "Home?" Tommy almost pouted. "Officer Krang lives next door, remember, and he talks to my parents." Sometimes. Tommy was nice, but sometimes Brittany had to almost draw him a picture. "Well then, do you want to go, to a movie tomorrow night, Britt?" he asked and smiled. Sometimes Tommy didn't need a picture drawn for him. Bobby had to lay the bike down in the middle of the road to avoid running into the cars that were piling into one another just ahead of him. There was nothing else to do. There were big, solid-looking trees lining both sides of the road, and the crumbling automobiles that were adding themselves to the accident he was riding into had already blocked any hope of riding past them on either side. He was hoping for some simple, annoying road rash, but the road was not always the most accommodating of maladies. And Bobby wound up in an ambulance with a bone sticking out of one forearm, a comforting shot of morphine in his other arm, and a trip to the hospital courtesy of the volunteer fire and rescue folks. Doctors took the drowsy, sedated young man into a curtained-off space in the emergency room and determined that there was nothing more wrong with him than the nasty compound fracture that poked out of his forearm. They took him to X-ray, gave him an IV drip of antibiotics, and prepped him for irrigation and debridement in the OR. The young man's open fracture was a Class 1, so after the bone was cleaned, the surrounding tissue was determined to be viable. The bone was placed in its original location in his arm, and an external fixator was placed on his arm. He was wheeled back to the hospital room. A couple of hours later, Bobby woke up with tubes in his unbroken arm and a raging thirst. He found a button at his healthy hand and pressed it. A few minutes later, a cute little red-haired nurse came into his room, smiled and said, "How are you feeling?" Bobby replied, stumbling over words that remained stuck in the cotton in his mouth. "Thirsty." "7 Up?" she asked. "Great," he mumbled in response. A minute or an hour later, Bobby was so looped on painkillers that he wouldn't have known if the woman had been gone a week. The nurse came back in, put a plastic glass with a straw in it on a tray that could be swung over his bed, and said, "Dr. Scarafaggio will be in a minute to talk to you about your x-rays." Then she bounced out of the little room. Bobby could only nod and reach for a welcome sip of the cold, wet liquid. Later, who knew when, a tall man wearing a white doctor's lab coat and a stethoscope over his shoulder, carrying a big folder of what turned out to be Bobby's x-rays, came into Bobby's room. "You're a lucky young man, Mr. Jones," the tall man clicked. "You're a cockroach," Bobby stammered. "Well, I suppose that you could say that, but I am a very accomplished cockroach," the big bug explained. "As far as my qualifications go, I did pre-med at Universidad de Bologna in Italy, med school at Hopkins, an orthopedic residency at the Cleveland Clinic, a surgical sports medicine fellowship in Taos, and an orthopedic trauma fellowship with J.T. Watkins in St. Louis. I'm the best that you could hope to get for what you've got." But Bobby meant to interrupt but ran out of steam. "Let's look at your film so I can explain what needs to be done." And the doctor, with the head of a disgusting insect, slid a large x-ray of Bobby's arm into the clip on the light box on the wall. "You're very fortunate. The open fracture of your radius is a grade 1 injury and should heal like normal closed fracture. You can spend the night and we'll check you tomorrow. You will probably be able to go home in another day or two, and then we'll see you in a week. If everything is healing as it should, you should be back to normal in about 8 weeks and just need some minimal PT and maybe a little OT. Any questions?" the bug asked. "No," Bobby shook his head. "Thanks." Dr. Scarafaggio said, "Good. See you soon," turned and walked out of the room. Bobby shook his head slowly in amazement and let the painkillers take over. He was snoring in 5 minutes.